The wooden steps of the Tahlequah courthouse had never felt so cold beneath Victoria Garrett's bare feet, though the June sun blazed overhead in the Oklahoma heat of 1879. She stood with her hands bound loosely in front of her cotton dress torn at the shoulder, her dark hair tangled and falling around her face as men gathered below, some with cigars dangling from their lips, others with calculating eyes that made her stomach turn. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the square, calling out numbers that represented what remained of her father's debts that somehow, impossibly, now included her. "Do I hear 500? The auctioneer was a portly man with sweat stains spreading across his vest. 500 for this healthy young woman, good for housework, cooking, and whatever else a man might need. Victoria's throat tightened. This could not be happening. 3 weeks ago, she had been sitting in her father's study, reviewing the ledgers of their small ranch just outside town. Then the fever took him. Then the banker came with papers she did not understand, papers that claimed everything, papers that somehow gave them the right to stand her on these steps like livestock. 500, called a voice from the crowd. 600, came another. She closed her eyes, trying to remember her mother's face, dead now 10 years, trying to remember what it felt like to be safe, to be loved, to be anything other than this wretched thing being sold to the highest bidder. 700, the crowd pressed closer. Victoria could smell the tobacco and whiskey, could hear the crude jokes being passed between the men. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about running, but where would she go? The marshal stood at the base of the steps, his hand resting on his pistol. The town had decided her fate, and Tahlequah was not kind to those who disrupted its proceedings. $1,000. The voice cut through the chaos like a knife, deep and steady, and the crowd fell silent. Victoria's eyes snapped open. A man stood at the back of the gathering, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low enough to shadow his face. He wore dusty riding clothes and a gun belt that suggested he knew how to use what hung from it. He did not look like the merchants and ranchers who had been bidding. He looked like the kind of man who lived in the saddle and answered to no one. 1,000. The auctioneer seemed stunned. "Well now, that's quite the offer. Do I hear 1,100? Silence." The other men shuffled, looking at this stranger who had just outbid them all by a considerable margin. No one spoke. 1,100. The auctioneer tried again. Going once, going twice, sold. His gavel cracked against the wooden podium. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $1,000. Victoria's knees nearly gave out. The marshal moved toward her, untying the rope around her wrists with rough efficiency. The stranger pushed through the crowd, and as he drew closer, Victoria could finally see his face. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair curling slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His jaw was set in a hard line, his expression unreadable. He pulled a leather pouch from his jacket and counted out the money to the auctioneer without a word. The transaction was sickeningly quick. Papers were signed. A bill of sale was pressed into the stranger's hand, ink still wet, declaring that Victoria Garrett was now his property, purchased legally and binding under territorial law. The marshal gave her a small shove toward her new owner. "She's all yours, mister." The stranger looked at her for a long moment, those gray eyes searching her face. Then he turned and walked toward a black horse tied at the hitching post across the square. Victoria stood frozen, unsure whether to follow, unsure of anything anymore. He glanced back over his shoulder. "Come on," he said quietly. "Unless you want to stand there all day." Her legs moved of their own accord. What choice did she have? She followed him to the horse, acutely aware of the eyes watching her, the whispers already starting. The stranger untied his horse and swung himself into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down to pull her up behind him. His hand was calloused and strong, and he lifted her as though she weighed nothing. She settled awkwardly behind the saddle, unsure where to put her hands. "Hold on," he said, and urged the horse forward. They rode through Tahlequah's main street in silence, past the general store and the saloon, past the church where Victoria had attended services every Sunday of her childhood. Faces turned to watch them pass. She kept her eyes down, shame burning in her chest. Everyone would know by nightfall. Everyone would know what had happened to Thomas Garrett's daughter. They left the town behind, following the road that wound north through rolling hills covered in oak and hickory. The stranger did not speak. Victoria clung to the back of the saddle, her mind reeling. Who was this man? What did he want with her? The question she was most afraid to ask burned in her throat, but she could not give it voice. After an hour, they turned off the main road onto a narrow trail that cut through dense forest. The trees provided welcome shade from the June heat, and birds called from the branches overhead. The horse picked its way carefully over roots and stones. Finally, they emerged into a clearing where a cabin stood, solidly built from logs, with a stone chimney and a small barn behind it. Chickens scratched in the yard. A vegetable garden grew in neat rows near the side of the house. The stranger dismounted and reached up to help her down. Victoria's legs trembled as her feet touched the ground. She had been holding herself so rigidly that her muscles ached. He led the horse to the barn without a word, and she stood in the yard, uncertain, her heart pounding. This was it, then. This isolated place where no one would hear her scream, where no one would know what became of her. He emerged from the barn a few minutes later, having unsaddled and watered the horse. He walked toward her, and Victoria took an involuntary step back. He stopped, noticing. His expression softened slightly. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. She wanted to believe him. She could not. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded paper, the bill of sale. He held it out to her. Victoria stared at it, not understanding. "Take it," he said. Her hand shook as she reached out and took the document. She unfolded it slowly. There it was in black ink. Her name, his name, Vincent Dalton, the amount paid, the date. Legal proof that she belonged to him. "There's a fire going in the stove," Vincent said, nodding toward the cabin. "Kitchen's just inside. Burn it." Victoria's eyes snapped up to his face. "What?" "The bill of sale. Burn it." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You are not my property. You are not anyone's property. Burn it and be free." She could not breathe, could not think. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand right now." He gestured toward the cabin again. "Go on." "Burn it. Then we'll talk." Victoria walked toward the cabin on unsteady legs, clutching the paper in her hand. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was neat and simply furnished a table with 2 chairs, a cookstove with a fire burning low in its belly, a rocking chair near the fireplace, a curtained doorway that likely led to a bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. She moved to the stove and opened the iron door. Heat radiated against her face. She looked down at the bill of sale one more time, at her name written there like she was no more than a horse or a piece of furniture. Then she fed it into the flames. The paper caught immediately, curling and blackening. Within seconds, it was ash. Victoria stood there watching the last traces disappear, and suddenly her knees buckled. She caught herself against the stove, gasping. The tears she had been holding back since she was dragged from her home 3 weeks ago finally came, violent and wrenching. She sank to the floor and wept. She did not hear Vincent come inside. Did not know he was there until he crouched down a few feet away, giving her space but offering his presence. He did not tell her to stop crying, did not tell her everything would be fine. He just waited. When the tears finally subsided, leaving her hollow and exhausted, Victoria wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at him. "Why did you do that?" Vincent was silent for a moment, his eyes distant. "My mother was sold on courthouse steps in Missouri when I was 10 years old. Man who bought her worked her to death within 2 years. I swore if I ever had the means, I would not let it happen to anyone else if I could stop it." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. "I am sorry. So am I." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, you should eat something. You look like you have not had a decent meal in days." He was right. The jail had fed her, but barely. She let him pull her to her feet. Vincent moved to the small kitchen area and began pulling out supplies: bread, cheese, dried meat, a jar of preserves. He worked with efficient movements, and Victoria realized this man was accustomed to taking care of himself. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. She sat. He placed a plate in front of her with more food than she had seen in weeks, then poured her a cup of water from a pitcher. Victoria ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger. Vincent sat across from her with his own plate, eating in silence. The quiet between them was not uncomfortable exactly, but it was full of unspoken questions. Finally, Victoria found her voice. "What happens now?" Vincent set down his fork. "That depends on what you want. You are free to go anywhere you choose. I will give you money for a stagecoach, help you get to family if you have any. Or you can stay here for a while until you figure out what you want to do. There is a spare room. You would be safe." "Why would you do this? You spent $1,000 on me. I have the money." He said it simply, as fact, not boast. And it seemed important. Victoria looked around the cabin. It was small but well maintained. Through the window she could see the garden, the barn, the forest beyond. It was peaceful here, isolated but in a way that felt like sanctuary rather than prison. "I have no family," she admitted quietly. "My mother died when I was 13. My father just passed. There is no one." The admission hurt. She had never felt so alone. "Then stay," Vincent said. "At least until you have a plan. I am gone most days, working cattle for ranches in the area. You would have the place to yourself. All I ask is that you do not go into town talking about what happened. People have long memories, and I prefer to keep to myself." It was a reasonable request. "More than reasonable," Victoria nodded slowly. "I can cook and clean to earn my keep. You do not owe me anything." "I want to," she met his eyes. "Please, I need to feel useful. I need to feel like I am not just taking charity." Vincent studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. If it makes you feel better, but you are not a servant here, you are a guest. Understood?" "Understood." He stood and carried his plate to the wash basin. "I will show you the spare room. You should rest. You look exhausted." He was not wrong. Now that the immediate terror had passed, Victoria felt the full weight of the past weeks pressing down on her. Vincent led her through the curtained doorway into a small bedroom with a simple bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto the forest. The bed had clean sheets and a quilt that looked handmade. "This is yours for as long as you need it," Vincent said. He paused in the doorway. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word you are safe here." Victoria believed him. Perhaps it was foolish, perhaps she was simply too tired to be cautious anymore, but she believed him. "Thank you." He nodded and left, pulling the curtain closed behind him. Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, testing it. Soft, comfortable. More comfortable than the jail cell, certainly. She lay back, just for a moment, and was asleep before she could think another thought. When she woke, the light coming through the window was golden and slanted late afternoon. She sat up, disoriented, then remembered where she was. Vincent's cabin. She was free. The thought still seemed impossible. She pushed through the curtain into the main room. Vincent sat at the table cleaning his rifle with methodical care. He looked up when she entered. "Sleep well. Better than I have in weeks." Victoria glanced around. "Is there water for washing?" "There is a pump outside, and I left a basin in your room. There are also some clothes in the dresser that might fit you. They were my mother's. Brought them west with me, could never bring myself to get rid of them. You are welcome to them." The generosity kept surprising her. Victoria found the basin and went outside to fill it from the pump. The evening air was cooler, pleasant. She washed in her room, then opened the dresser. Inside were several dresses, a nightgown, and some undergarments, all neatly folded and smelling faintly of cedar. She chose a simple blue dress that fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the shoulders. It felt wonderful to be in clean clothes. When she emerged again, Vincent had put away his rifle and was stoking the fire in the stove. "I was going to make some stew for supper. Nothing fancy." "Let me," Victoria said quickly. "Please." He hesitated, then stepped aside. Victoria moved into the small kitchen and began examining the supplies. She found potatoes, carrots, onions, dried beef, herbs. She set to work, and it felt good to have something to do with her hands, something normal and domestic and far from the nightmare of the courthouse steps. Vincent sat at the table, watching her work. After a while, he said, "You are good at that." "My mother taught me." "She said a woman should know how to make a home, no matter where she finds herself." Victoria paused, knife hovering over a carrot. "She would be ashamed of me now, being sold like that." "She would be ashamed of the men who sold you, not of you." Vincent's voice was firm. "You did nothing wrong." Victoria was not sure she believed that, but she appreciated him saying it. She finished preparing the stew and set it on the stove to simmer. The cabin filled with the rich smell of cooking food. They ate together as the sun set, painting the sky through the windows in shades of orange and purple. "Tell me about your ranch," Vincent said. "The one you lost." Victoria set down her spoon. "It was small, 200 acres. My father raised cattle, some horses. We had a few hired hands, but after my mother died, he let most of them go. Said he could not afford them anymore. I helped him with the books, tried to manage the money, but he was never good at the business side of things. He was a dreamer. Always believed the next season would be better." She smiled sadly. "It never was." "What happened?" "He borrowed money from the bank in town. Mr. Whitmore, the banker, said it was a sure thing. Low interest, easy terms. But the terms were not easy. They were impossible. When my father got sick, everything fell apart. I tried to talk to Mr. Whitmore, tried to work out a payment plan, but he would not listen. Then my father died, and suddenly there were all these liens and debts I did not even know about. The marshal came and took me from the house. They said I could work off the debts by being indentured." Her hands clenched into fists. "But we both know that is not what they meant." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Whitmore is known for that. He has done it to 3 families that I know of, loaned them money they could not pay back, then took everything. The law looks the other way because he greases the right palms. Can nothing be done? Not without proof he is breaking the law. And men like Whitmore are careful." Vincent leaned back in his chair. "But he is not untouchable. Eventually, men like that make mistakes." They finished their meal in contemplative silence. Victoria washed the dishes while Vincent disappeared outside to check on the animals. When she was done, she found herself standing in the middle of the cabin, unsure what to do with herself. She had been so focused on surviving the last few weeks that now, faced with safety and quiet, she felt unmoored. Vincent came back inside, bringing the cool evening air with him. "I will be leaving early tomorrow morning. Should be back by evening. Will you be all right here alone?" "Yes." Victoria was not entirely sure that was true, but she did not want to seem weak. "I will be fine." He showed her where he kept his spare rifle, how to load it, how to bar the door if needed. I do not expect trouble, but it is better to be prepared. Anyone comes around asking questions, you tell them you are my cousin from Kansas, here for a visit. People around here mind their own business mostly, but it pays to have a story. Victoria nodded, committing the details to memory. When Vincent finally retired to his own room, she realized he had given her the better of the 2 bedrooms. She lay in the darkness and listened to the sounds of the forest. Crickets sang. An owl hooted somewhere distant. The sheets smelled like soap and sunshine. She thought about burning the bill of sale, how the paper had curled and blackened in the flames, how Vincent had stood there and given her back something that had been stolen. Freedom. Dignity. She did not know what she had done to deserve such kindness from a stranger, but she was grateful beyond words. The next morning, she woke to the sound of Vincent moving around the cabin. By the time she dressed and emerged, he was already preparing to leave. He had coffee made and biscuits warming on the stove. "Help yourself to anything you need," he said, settling his hat on his head. "I will be back before dark." Then he was gone, and Victoria was alone. She stood in the cabin for a long moment, listening to the silence. Then she poured herself coffee and set about exploring her temporary home more thoroughly. The cabin was simple but showed signs of care. The floor was swept clean. The windows were washed. Books lined a small shelf near the fireplace, mostly practical volumes about ranching and farming, but also a few novels and a worn Bible. She spent the morning tidying, though there was little that needed doing. She watered the garden, fed the chickens, collected eggs. The work was soothing, rhythmic. It reminded her of life on her father's ranch, of better days. In the afternoon, she baked bread, taking satisfaction in the familiar process. She made enough for several days, filling the cabin with the warm smell of yeast and crust. She wondered if Vincent would appreciate it or think she was overstepping. He returned as the sun was setting, riding slowly into the clearing. Victoria heard the horse and felt a flutter of nervousness. What if he had changed his mind? What if he had decided this was a mistake? But when he came inside, his face lit up at the sight of the bread cooling on the table. "That smells incredible." "I wanted to make myself useful," Victoria said quickly. "You did not need to, but I am grateful." He washed his hands at the basin and sat down heavily. He looked tired, dust covering his clothes, his face shadowed with exhaustion. "Difficult day?" Victoria asked, slicing bread and setting it before him with butter. "Long day. The Simmons Ranch lost some cattle to rustlers last night. Spent the day tracking them, but the trail went cold near the river." He bit into the bread and closed his eyes. "This is the best thing I have eaten in months." Victoria felt a small surge of pride. "There is stew left from yesterday if you want something more substantial." "That would be perfect." She heated the stew while Vincent removed his gun belt and boots. They fell into an easy pattern, her serving the meal, him eating gratefully. The silence between them was becoming comfortable, familiar. "How was your day?" he asked. It was such a simple question, the kind a husband might ask a wife, the kind that assumed she mattered, that her experience was worth hearing about. Victoria found herself smiling. "Quiet. I tended the garden and the chickens, explored a bit. You have a nice place here." "It is peaceful," Vincent agreed. "That is why I chose it. After my mother died, I drifted for a while. Worked cattle drives, hired my gun out a few times, things I am not proud of. But I saved my money, and when I found this place 5 years ago, I knew I wanted to stay. Build something." "Why did you never marry?" The question was out before Victoria could stop it. She felt her cheeks heat. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "No, it is all right." Vincent set down his spoon. I came close once, woman in Arkansas, but she wanted a different kind of life than I could give her. Wanted a big house in town, society, all that. I wanted this. He gestured around the cabin. We wanted different things, so we went different directions. Do you regret it? Sometimes. But mostly, no. I learned that you cannot build a life with someone who wants to change everything about you. He looked at her. What about you? No suitor waiting in the wings, Victoria shook her head. There was a boy when I was 17, rancher's son, but my father needed me after my mother died and the boy was not patient. He married someone else. She stirred her stew absently. I thought I had time. I thought I would figure it all out eventually. You still have time. You are what, 21, 22, 23? Practically ancient, Vincent said with a small smile. Victoria laughed, surprising herself. It felt good to laugh. When had she last done that? And you are, what, 50? 28, he said, pretending offense. And here I thought I was being charming. You will have to try harder than that. The teasing felt natural, easy. Victoria realized with some surprise that she was enjoying herself. That for the first time since her father died, she felt something other than fear or grief. The days began to form a pattern. Vincent would leave in the morning for whatever ranch work he had lined up, and Victoria would tend to the cabin and the small homestead. She cooked meals that Vincent praised extravagantly, possibly because he had been living on his own cooking for years. She mended his clothes, finding holes in his shirts and socks that he had been ignoring. She planted more vegetables in the garden, expanding it. In the evenings, they would eat together and talk. Vincent told her stories about his travels, about the places he had seen between Missouri and Oklahoma. Victoria told him about her childhood, about her mother's laugh and her father's stubbornness. They discovered they both loved reading, and Vincent brought home a novel from town one day, a gift that made Victoria's eyes shine. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Victoria knew she should be making plans to leave, to start her own life somewhere, but she could not bring herself to do it. The cabin felt like home in a way her father's ranch never quite had. And Vincent felt like something she could not quite name yet, something that made her heart beat faster when she heard his horse in the clearing at evening one night. A storm rolled in. Thunder cracked so loudly it shook the cabin, and lightning illuminated the windows in brilliant flashes. Victoria lay in her bed, trying not to be afraid, but the storm reminded her of the night the marshal came, the night her whole world fell apart. A particularly loud crack made her jump. A moment later, there was a soft knock on her door frame. "Victoria, you all right?" She sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "Yes, just startled." Vincent pushed aside the curtain. He was in his nightclothes, his hair tousled from sleep. "You do not sound all right." "I am fine, really." Another crack of thunder. Victoria flinched despite herself. Vincent moved into the room and sat on the edge of her bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "My mother used to hate storms. When I was little, she would hold me during them and sing. After she was gone, I had to get through them alone. It took a while, but I learned that storms always pass." "How long did it take," Victoria asked quietly, "to stop being afraid?" "Years, honestly." He looked at her in the darkness. "But it gets easier. Everything gets easier eventually." They sat together as the storm raged outside. Vincent did not leave, and Victoria did not ask him to. His presence was comforting, solid. Eventually, the thunder began to move away, growing more distant. The rain continued to fall, softer now, a gentle patter against the roof. "Vincent," Victoria said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you." "For everything." He was quiet for a moment. "You do not need to thank me." "I do. You saved my life. You gave me a place when I had nowhere else to go. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect." "Victoria." He hesitated. "I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched. Here it was. He was going to ask her to leave. She had overstayed her welcome. That day at the courthouse, Vincent continued slowly, I was in town to buy supplies. I heard the commotion and went to see what was happening. When I saw you standing there, saw what they were doing to you, I felt sick. But I also felt something else. He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the faint light from the window. I felt like I was supposed to be there, like I was supposed to help you. And these past few weeks, having you here, it has been the best part of my day. Coming home to a lit cabin, to a warm meal, to someone to talk to. To you. Victoria's breath caught. Vincent, I am not saying this to make you feel obligated, he said quickly. You do not owe me anything. But I needed you to know, I care about you, Victoria, more than I probably should given the circumstances. She reached out in the darkness and found his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. I care about you too. I have been trying not to because it seemed complicated and probably foolish, but I do. It does not have to be complicated. Vincent shifted closer. Unless you want it to be. I do not want complicated, Victoria said softly. I want simple, I want this. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. The gesture sent warmth flooding through her. Then stay, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs here, someone who wants to be here. I do want to be here, with you. The words hung between them, full of promise. Vincent reached up and cupped her face gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. Instead, she leaned into his touch. He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Victoria felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. When they pulled apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that for days. Why did you wait? I wanted to make sure you felt the same, that I was not just convenient or safe, or Victoria kissed him again, silencing his doubts. This time it was deeper, more certain. His arms came around her and she leaned into his strength, into the solid reality of him. The storm continued outside, but inside the cabin, everything felt warm and right. They spent the rest of the night talking quietly, lying side by side on top of the quilt, holding hands like teenagers. Victoria told him about her dreams, the ones she had set aside to care for her father. Vincent told her about the house he wanted to build someday, bigger than the cabin, with room for children and guests and all the life they might create together. Are you proposing? Victoria asked, half teasing, half serious. Not yet, Vincent said. When I propose, you will know it. But I am saying that I am thinking about a future, one that includes you if you will have me. I will have you, Victoria said softly. I think I have been yours since you handed me that bill of sale to burn. No, Vincent said firmly. You are not mine. You are yours. But I hope you will choose to be with me. That is different. She understood what he meant. The distinction mattered. I choose to be with you. Then that is enough for now. They fell asleep as the storm faded and the first light of dawn crept through the window. When Victoria woke, Vincent was gone, but there was a note on the table written in his careful hand. Gone to town for supplies. Back by noon. I love you. Victoria pressed the note to her chest, her eyes stinging with happy tears. I love you. 3 words that changed everything. She spent the morning in a daze of happiness, going through her chores with a lightness she had not felt in years. She made a special meal for when Vincent returned, using the last of the bacon and fresh eggs from the chickens. She put on her best dress, the green one with the lace collar, and braided her hair carefully. When she heard his horse, she flew to the door. Vincent dismounted and saw her standing there, and his whole face transformed with a smile. He crossed the yard in long strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and kissing her soundly. I missed you, he said against her lips. You were gone 3 hours. Still missed you. He set her down but kept his arms around her waist. I brought you something. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Open it." Victoria unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a length of fabric, beautiful deep blue cotton with tiny white flowers printed on it. "Vincent, this is beautiful. I thought you could make a new dress. You have been wearing my mother's clothes, which is fine, but I wanted you to have something of your own." He looked suddenly uncertain. "If you want it, if it is not too forward, it is perfect." She stood on her toes and kissed him. "Thank you." They spent the afternoon together, Vincent claiming he had earned a day off. They walked through the forest, following a stream that wound through the trees. Vincent showed her his favorite spots, a clearing where deer came to drink, a fallen log where he sometimes sat to think, a small waterfall that caught the sunlight and made rainbows in the mist. "I have never shown anyone this place before," he admitted as they sat on the bank watching the water cascade over the rocks. "I always thought I would someday, when I found the right person." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad I am that person. So am I." They kissed by the waterfall as the afternoon light turned golden through the trees. Vincent's hands tangled in her hair, and Victoria let herself fall into the feeling, into the rightness of being held by someone who valued her, who saw her as an equal, who loved her for who she was rather than what she could provide. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky, Vincent took her hand. "I want to ask you something." "Ask." "Will you marry me, Victoria Garrett? Not because you owe me anything, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to build a life with me. Because you love me the way I love you." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Vincent pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver with a small blue stone. "This was my mother's, the only thing I have left of her. I would be honored if you would wear it." He slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Victoria looked at the ring through her tears, then at Vincent's face, so full of hope and love. "I will wear it proudly," she said. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Tahlequah, with only the pastor and his wife as witnesses. Vincent wore his best suit, and Victoria wore a dress she had made from the blue fabric he had bought her. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria felt her heart might burst. They held a small celebration at the cabin with a few of Vincent's rancher friends and their wives. The women were kind to Victoria, welcoming her into their circle without judgment or questions. If they knew about the auction, they did not mention it. By evening, everyone had gone home and Vincent and Victoria were alone. Vincent carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing. He set her down gently in the middle of their cabin, their home now, truly. Victoria had moved her things into his room the day before, and it felt right to share that space with him. "Mrs. Dalton," Vincent said, testing out the name. "Mr. Dalton," Victoria replied with a smile. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Vincent was patient, careful, making sure Victoria felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Victoria felt a peace she had never known. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Vincent replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I promise you, Victoria, I will spend every day making sure you know it." The months that followed were the happiest of Victoria's life. She and Vincent fell into an easy rhythm, working together to improve the homestead. They expanded the garden, added more chickens, bought 2 pigs from a neighboring farm. Vincent taught Victoria to shoot, insisting she should know how to protect herself when he was away. She proved to be a natural, her aim steady and true. In the autumn, they attended a harvest dance in town. Victoria had been nervous about going, worried about facing the people who had watched her be auctioned on the courthouse steps. But Vincent held her hand tightly as they entered the community hall, and when people looked at them, they saw a respectable married couple, nothing more. Mr. Whitmore, the banker who had orchestrated her father's downfall, was there with his wife. When he saw Victoria, his face went pale. She walked right up to him, Vincent at her side. "Mr. Whitmore," she said coolly, "I trust you remember me." The banker cleared his throat. "Mrs. Dalton." "Yes, of course. I heard you had married. Congratulations." "Thank you." Victoria let the silence stretch uncomfortably. "I wanted you to know that I have not forgotten what you did to my father, how you manipulated him, trapped him in debt, and then stole everything when he died. I have not forgotten how you arranged for me to be sold on the courthouse steps like livestock." Whitmore glanced around nervously. Other people were starting to listen. "Now see here, that was all perfectly legal perhaps, but not moral, not right. And someday, Mr. Whitmore, people will see you for what you are." Victoria smiled, but it was cold. "Enjoy the dance." She walked away, Vincent following. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "That was brave," he murmured. "That was necessary," Victoria replied. "I needed him to know I am not broken, that he did not win. He definitely did not win." They danced that night, Vincent spinning Victoria around the floor while the fiddles played. She laughed and felt light, felt free in a way that had nothing to do with burned documents and everything to do with the man who held her. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Victoria and Vincent spent long evenings by the fire, reading together, talking, making plans for the spring. Vincent wanted to buy more land, expand their holdings. Victoria wanted to start breeding horses, using the skills her father had taught her. They dreamed together, building a future one conversation at a time. In January, Victoria realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, then another, before allowing herself to hope. When she was certain, she told Vincent one evening over dinner. "I am with child," she said simply. Vincent dropped his fork. "You are?" "Yes. I think I am about 2 months along." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms, laughing and kissing her and holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby," Victoria confirmed, tears streaming down her face. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria bloomed, her cheeks gaining color, her body growing round with their child. Vincent was attentive to the point of being comical, constantly asking if she was comfortable, if she needed anything, if she was sure she should be doing whatever task she was engaged in. Victoria found it endearing even when it was annoying. In late summer, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, with Vincent pacing outside while the midwife worked inside. But when it was over, when the baby's cry filled the cabin, Vincent was allowed in to meet his son. "He is perfect," Vincent said, staring down at the tiny, red-faced infant in Victoria's arms. "You are perfect. God, Victoria, look what we made." They named him Thomas after Victoria's father. Little Thomas had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and from the first moment, he had his parents wrapped around his tiny finger. The years passed in a blur of happiness. They bought more land, built a bigger house just as Vincent had dreamed. Victoria started her horse breeding operation, and within a few years, she had developed a reputation for quality stock. Vincent continued working cattle but also helped Victoria with the horses, the two of them partners in every sense of the word. When Thomas was 3, Victoria gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Alina after Vincent's mother. 2 years after that came another son, James. Their home was full of laughter and noise and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent and Victoria stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was helping his younger siblings build a fort out of hay bales, his serious face so much like his father's that Victoria had to smile. "You ever think about that day?" Vincent asked quietly. "The courthouse." "Sometimes," Victoria admitted, "but not with fear anymore, more with gratitude." "Gratitude. It led me to you. If my father had not died, if I had not lost everything, if you had not been in town that day, we might never have found each other. And I cannot imagine my life without you now." Vincent pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I used to think that day was about me saving you, but I realize now you saved me too. I was lonely, Victoria. I had this place, but it was not a home. You made it a home. You and our children." "We saved each other," Victoria said. "That is how it is supposed to work." They stood together as the sun set, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the house, supper was waiting. Later, they would tuck the children into bed, read them stories, kiss them good night. Then Victoria and Vincent would retire to their own room, to their own bed, and hold each other the way they had every night for 10 years. Life was not always easy. There were hard years when the rains did not come and the crops failed. There were illnesses that scared them, accidents that could have been tragedies. But through it all, they had each other. They had built something real and solid, something that no banker or auctioneer or cruel twist of fate could take away. Vincent kept his promise. Every single day, through word and deed, he made sure Victoria knew she was loved. And Victoria did the same for him. Their love was not the whirlwind romance of storybooks. It was steadier than that, deeper. It was built on respect and trust, on shared dreams and quiet moments, on the 1,000 small ways they chose each other every day. Sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, they would ride out to the clearing with the waterfall, just the two of them while a neighbor watched the children. They would sit on the bank and hold hands and remember when they were new to each other, when everything was uncertain and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I would do it all again," Victoria said once, during one of these visits. "Every hard thing, every scary moment. If I knew it would lead me here to you, I would do it all again." "You would not change anything?" Vincent asked. "Not your father's death, not the auction, nothing." Victoria thought about it seriously. "I would save my father if I could. That pain was real and I miss him every day. But the rest? No, because all of it, good and bad, made us who we are. It brought us together. And what we have is worth every moment of fear and grief it took to get here." Vincent squeezed her hand. "I love you, Victoria Dalton. I love you, Vincent Dalton." The words were simple, but they contained everything. 10 years of partnership, of love, of building a life together from the ashes of what Victoria had lost. She had stood on courthouse steps, terrified and alone, believing her life was over. But it had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. As they rode home that evening, the setting sun warm on their backs, Victoria thought about the girl she had been that day in Tahlequah. She wished she could go back and tell that frightened young woman that everything would be all right. More than all right. That the tall cowboy with the storm-gray eyes would buy her freedom and give her his heart. That she would find a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined. That she would build a home and a family and a life worth living. But she could not go back. She could only go forward, hand in hand with the man she loved, toward whatever future awaited them. And as she looked at Vincent's profile, strong and familiar, she knew that whatever came, they would face it together. The years continued to unfold. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his mother. Eleanor was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and challenging her brothers to races. James was the sweet one, the one who brought his mother flowers and helped his father without being asked. Vincent's hair began to show threads of silver at the temples. Victoria's hands grew rougher from years of work, but her eyes remained bright. They aged together, gracefully, their love deepening with time rather than fading. When Thomas turned 15, he asked his father about the day his parents met. Vincent and Victoria exchanged a long look across the dinner table. They had always known this conversation would come eventually. "Your mother and I met in town," Vincent said carefully. "She was in trouble and I helped her. We fell in love, got married, and here we are." "That is not the whole story," Thomas said. He was perceptive, this son of theirs. "I have heard whispers about an auction, about you buying Mother." Victoria's heart clenched. She had hoped her children would never have to know that part of their history, but she had also raised them to value truth. "You are right," she said quietly. "There is more to the story, and you are old enough to hear it now." She told him everything. About losing her father, about the debts, about standing on the courthouse steps while men bid on her like she was livestock. About Vincent paying $1,000 for her freedom and then giving her the bill of sale to burn. About how he had offered her a home with no expectations, no demands. About how they had fallen in love slowly, carefully, building trust before passion. "Your father saved my life," Victoria said. "Not just my physical life, but my sense of self. He reminded me that I was a person with value, with choices, with a future. He gave me back my freedom, and then I chose to give him my heart. I have never regretted that choice, not for a single day." Thomas was quiet for a long time, processing. Then he looked at his father. "You are a good man." Vincent's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I tried to do the right thing." "That is all. You did more than that. You changed her life. You changed all our lives." Thomas stood and went to his father, embracing him. "I am proud to be your son." Eleanor and James, who had been listening with wide eyes, joined the embrace. Victoria watched her family hold each other, and her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. This was what love looked like. Not just between a man and a woman, but between parents and children, between people who chose to care for each other fiercely and faithfully. That night, after the children were in bed, Vincent and Victoria lay together in the darkness. "That went better than I expected," Victoria said. "Our children are good people. We raised them right." "We did we not?" Victoria smiled. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life. That I am this happy. Believe it. You deserve every bit of happiness you have. So do you." Vincent pulled her closer, and they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms the way they had for 15 years, the way they would for years to come. More time passed. Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a smart young woman who loved horses as much as he did. They built a house on a corner of the family land and started their own family. Eleanor shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to study medicine and moved to Kansas City to attend a women's medical college. James stayed home, helping his parents run the ranch and showing a natural talent for business. Vincent and Victoria became grandparents. The first time Victoria held Thomas's daughter in her arms, she wept. "My mother never got to meet her grandchildren," she told Vincent that night. "She would have loved this, loved seeing how our family grew." "She sees it," Vincent said with certainty. "Somewhere, somehow she sees it. And she is proud." They celebrated their 20th anniversary, then their 25th. Their hair went gray, their faces lined with the marks of time and weather, but they still held hands, still kissed each other goodbye every morning and hello every evening. Still found reasons to sneak away for private moments, for whispered conversations and shared laughter. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party. Friends came from all over the territory, filling their home with noise and celebration. A young reporter from the Tahlequah newspaper asked if he could interview them about their long marriage. "What is your secret?" the reporter asked, pencil poised over his notebook. 30 years together. That is quite an achievement." Vincent and Victoria looked at each other. "The secret is that there is no secret," Vincent said. "You choose each other every day. You work at it. You forgive each other when you mess up, and you celebrate each other when things go right. You also marry the right person to begin with," Victoria added. "Someone who sees you as an equal. Someone who respects you and challenges you and makes you want to be better." "You two are clearly devoted to each other," the reporter said. "Was it love at first sight?" "No," Victoria said honestly. "It was fear at first sight, confusion, uncertainty. The love came later, built on trust and friendship and shared experience. But it came and it stayed and it grew. That is what matters." The reporter scribbled notes, then asked a few more questions about their ranch, their children, their plans for the future. When he left, Vincent and Victoria stood on their porch, watching the sunset just as they had done thousands of times before. 30 years, Vincent said wonderingly. Where did the time go? Into this, Victoria gestured at the land around them, the house they had built, the life they had created. Into our children and grandchildren, into every day we spent together. I regret none of it. Neither do I. They went inside to rejoin their family, their home full of the people they loved most. As Victoria looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, she thought about that terrified girl on the courthouse steps. If she could go back and tell her that this was waiting, this love, this family, this beautiful life, would she have believed it? Probably not. But it would have been true anyway. The truth was that sometimes the worst moments of our lives led to the best. That sometimes losing everything made room for something better. That sometimes, when we were at our lowest, that was exactly when we were found by the person who would change everything. Vincent had found her on her worst day and given her a future. She had found him in his loneliness and given him a home. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and respect, of children raised right and a family bound together by choice as much as blood. Years continued to pass. Vincent and Victoria grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts still sharp. They spent quiet days on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played. They told stories about the old days, about when Oklahoma was still wild territory, about when they were young and everything was ahead of them. On a warm spring afternoon when Victoria was 67 and Vincent 72, they sat together on the porch swing Vincent had built years before. The afternoon light was golden, the air sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. Their youngest grandson, Thomas's boy, was playing with a wooden horse Vincent had carved for him. "I am tired," Vincent said quietly. Victoria looked at him, concerned. He had been growing weaker lately, his heart not what it used to be. The doctor had said it was just age, that they were both doing remarkably well for their years, but Victoria saw the changes. The way Vincent moved more slowly, rested more often. "Should we go inside? Let you lie down?" "No. I want to stay here with you, watch the sunset." He reached for her hand. "Victoria, if something happens to me, do not talk like that. We have to talk about it sometime. We are not young anymore." His grip tightened on her hand. "If I go first, I need you to know something. These 48 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Every single day, I thanked God that I was in Tahlequah that day, that I saw you on those steps, that I was given the chance to know you, to love you, to build this life with you." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Vincent, let me finish. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something beautiful. You built a family, a home, a legacy. and you did it with grace and courage and so much love." He brought her hand to his lips. "I love you, Victoria Dalton. I always have. I always will." "I love you too," Victoria whispered. "More than words can say." They sat together as the sun set, holding hands the way they had for nearly 5 decades. Vincent's breathing was steady, peaceful. As the last light faded from the sky, he leaned his head against hers and closed his eyes. "Beautiful sunset," he murmured. "The most beautiful," Victoria agreed. Vincent died in his sleep that night peacefully with Victoria beside him. The doctor said his heart simply gave out, that it had been weakening for months. But Victoria knew better. Vincent's heart had not given out. It had given everything it had to her, to their children, to the life they built together. It had nothing left to give, and so it rested. The funeral was large, attended by what seemed like half the territory. Vincent had been respected, admired, loved by those who knew him. But Victoria knew she was the one who had known him best, who had seen every side of him, who had loved him in all his complexity. She stood by his grave after everyone else had left, looking at the simple stone marker. Vincent Dalton. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. 1851–1927. "You did good," she said softly to the stone, to the man beneath it, to wherever his spirit had gone. "You saved me, and then you loved me, and you gave me a life I never dreamed possible. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." She lived another 6 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She stayed in the house she and Vincent had built, tending her gardens, managing the ranch with James's help, and telling stories about the man she had loved. On the morning of her 73rd birthday, Victoria woke feeling different, lighter somehow. She knew, with a certainty that came from deep within, that her time was short. She called her children to her bedside and said her goodbyes, telling each of them how proud she was, how much she loved them, how they were her greatest achievement. That evening, as the sun set and painted the Oklahoma sky in familiar golds and crimsons, Victoria closed her eyes. She felt Vincent's hand in hers, though she knew it could not be real. She heard his voice, warm and loving, saying her name. "I am coming," she whispered. And then, with a smile on her face, she went. They buried her next to Vincent, beneath an oak tree they had planted together 40 years before. The stone read, "Victoria Dalton, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, 1856–1929. But the true memorial to their love was not in the stones or the graves. It was in the children and grandchildren who carried their names and their values forward. It was in the ranch that James and his children still ran, breeding horses with the same care and dedication Victoria had pioneered. It was in the stories that were told for generations about the cowboy who bought a woman's freedom and then gave her his heart. Years later, a great-granddaughter would find an old ledger in the attic, its pages yellowed with age. Inside, in Victoria's careful handwriting, was the story of that day on the courthouse steps. The story of Vincent buying her freedom, of burning the bill of sale, of building a love that lasted nearly 50 years. The great-granddaughter would read it with tears in her eyes, understanding for the first time the foundation upon which her family was built. The story would be passed down, generation after generation. The story of love found in the darkest moment, of freedom given and received, of two people who chose each other every day and built something beautiful from the ruins of what was lost. It became the family's most treasured story, a reminder that even in our worst moments, there is possibility. That even when everything seems lost, love can find us. That the end of one story can be the beginning of another, better one, and somewhere, beyond the veil that separates this world from whatever comes next, Vincent and Victoria walked together again. Young and strong, hands intertwined, hearts beating in rhythm. They walked through fields of gold under an endless sky, and they were home. They were together. They were, at last and always, exactly where they belonged. The town of Tahlequah would change over the decades. The courthouse where Victoria once stood in fear would be torn down and rebuilt. The streets would be paved. Cars would replace horses. But the story would remain, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, from father to son. The story of the auction on the courthouse steps, of the cowboy who bought a woman's freedom and then handed her the bill of sale to burn, of the love that grew from that moment of profound kindness. It was a story about many things, about injustice and redemption, about courage and hope, about the power of one person to change another's life completely. But most of all, it was a love story. The kind that reminded people what love was supposed to be: not ownership, not obligation, but choice. Every day, choosing each other. Every day, building something together. Every day, loving a little deeper, a little stronger, a little more faithfully. That was the legacy Victoria and Vincent left behind, not just in their children and their land, but in the example of what love could be when it was built on respect and freedom and genuine partnership. It was a legacy that would endure long after the Oklahoma Territory became a state, long after the Wild West was nothing but memory, long after everyone who had known them personally was gone. Because true love, the kind that changes you and makes you better, the kind that lasts through hardship and grows stronger with time, that kind of love never dies. It echoes forward through generations, inspiring others to seek the same depth of connection, the same fierce devotion, the same willingness to stand beside another person through everything life brings. Vincent and Victoria found that love on a courthouse square in June of 1879. They nurtured it through 50 years of marriage, through joy and sorrow, through triumph and loss. And when they died, they left it behind as a gift to everyone who came after, proof that even in the darkest moments, love can light the way home. Their story ended as all stories must. But the love they shared, and the family they built, and the example they set, those things lived on, imperishable and bright. A testament to two people who chose each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last forever.